Any app, any asset, any shop. That is the Flexa mission. It's one that is super easy to understand. Yet an article caught my eye that had me ask, quote, I wonder if in-app purchases in mobile games might one day be part of Flexa Network. Bloomberg recently published this article, shown on the screen, explained the journey so far of a play-to-earn game called Axie Infinity. This caught my eye because, as longtime channel members know, I've been exploring the NFT world trying to make sense of it. Looking over the Axie Infinity subreddit, you see a curious range of posts. I bucketed them into 3 categories. First, gamers. Second, speculators. Third, pundits. Welcome to Unusual Due Diligence. I am your host, the ancient god of the sea, Poseidon, whose spirit brings to life me, the talking milkshake. In this fresh episode, we take a look at Axie Infinity, but only enough to springboard into the meaty questions and themes that I see pop up. If you took an objective look across media, you'd find a confusing wasteland of the best and worst the cryptocurrency landscape has to offer. What I'll do is timecode this conversation so you can hop to the parts that interest you. Let's start with the first, which is the most immediate knee-jerk reaction that I see. The claim is that, quote, all crypto and NFT are scams, end quote. Well, that's functionally wrong. NFT and cryptocurrency are technology, and it's a new kind of technology the world has never seen. It's the equivalent of handing paper money to an uncivilized world and telling them that this paper money is how one eats their food. It's completely nonsensical, the nearest equivalent being us today. Imagine if you told your friends you'd listen to a talking milkshake extol the deep and secret inner workings of the cryptocurrency landscape. People would think you've gone mad. And madness is a phenomenon that's important. There's a certain wisdom and madness to the crowd. The same emergent behaviors that cause things like the tulip phenomena in economics are also the same that give us other great things in life. So let's unpack what the first argument is inside the Axie Infinity situation. As you unpack the claim about crypto and NFT in games, one place you end up at is a conversation on economic incentives within games. You see, people seem to have a greater problem with that than the game companies themselves. Let's consider this argument. Quote, players say that if they wanted to have fun, they'd play a real game. End quote. Let's take this game. This is Diablo Immortal, where it can cost up to 100,000 USD to gear up, as this article claims. Is real fun had playing Diablo Immortal, or is it this game, Genshin? In this game, Genshin also has in-app purchases, as shown on the screen. The reality is that today, in-app purchases make up the economic model of lots of games. So what is functionally different here between, say, Axie Infinity and Diablo Immortal? After all, that seems like a pretty fair question. Let's do a high-level comparison. Both are digital games. In both, players push buttons and actions occur. Both games have sprites and visual effects. Both titles have background music and sound effects. So, on the surface, in a very wide sense, comparing just, say, this Diablo Immortal to Axie Infinity, we find the two projects are the same. Okay, so is it specifically something in the art? Certainly, the art is different between the titles, but that doesn't seem to be the thing people are talking about. Instead, the point of contention is that Axie Infinity has players involved in a project where outside observers are calling Axie a scam, and yet, looking at Diablo Immortal, I'm not seeing those same sort of arguments, but there are certainly out there. Let's take a deeper look into this economics thought. Just comparing these two, let's show a flow of funds for Diablo Immortal and see how that works. This model seems like, at least on the surface, many people are okay with. What do I mean by that? Well, let's look at the flow of funds from the user to the game developer. In this model, funds flow from the user to an intermediary exchange. In this case, it's usually Apple or Google. There, the money is debited from the end user's wallet by way of a card purchase. So that's a silent 30 to, say, 46.15% on the transaction, plus or minus a few dollars. Wait, how did I come up with that number? Well, here is the fee schedule for Google and Apple. What I see here is what you see. Let's be conservative here for a moment and say that the fee paid is 15%, meaning every in-app purchase you make with your credit card in Google or Apple, that $100 we see, 15 to 30 of that US dollar go right out the door to the Google or the Apple. Except that isn't the full story. If you're using a credit card, and odds are pretty high that you are, then you also pay an average of an additional 16% tax in credit card fees for the transaction. So the real money impact to the end user is $100 plus, say, anywhere from $2 to $8 if you're taking up to a year to pay that off, as is shown on the screen from the calculator at Discover. Now, let's just back up a moment. I just said that $100 of in-app purchases for a mobile game, where somewhere between $70 to $85 actually make it to the game developer. That $100 in-app purchase actually costs the end user somewhere between $102 to $108 within a 12-month calendar year. So there's a real efficiency cost of somewhere between $17 to $38 for every $100 spent. Let's see how much net profit Google and Apple made last quarter, and that's on the screen. And now, just for comparison, let's see what the credit card companies made, and that is shown on the screen. Okay, this is why AMP token is so attractive to me. The AMP token, Flexa Network's well-known collateralization token, aims to solve the problem of inefficiency like that in payments. It's not even about the larger players, it's about the impact to the smaller players. You might even think Flexa getting involved with games or in-app purchases just isn't going to happen. But then you might be wrong. Consider the following tweet from Flexa HQ. Quote, "Enter the metaverse. GameStop is now live on Flexa. We've also enabled support for Axie Infinity." End quote. Now, as I'm on the screen here, people seem okay with this model. Why that is, I'm not quite sure. If I were talking to a conspiracy rabbit, there's probably an argument here that the people most vocal against change of this system are the ones who directly benefit from it. Are the player and the game developer getting optimal value out of this existing setup? I'll let you decide. Now, let's compare that model to the play-to-earn model, which I feel is a terrible name. Do you know what a professional basketball player calls their play-to-earn model? Well, it's called a job. Okay, let's keep exploring. Let's look at the model in a simplified sense. First, game developers create a world where there's a viable use for their token or coin. Next, those game developers enable that world to be available to players of that space. The players then, with their time and energy, earn those coins or tokens. Lastly, the game developers enable their in-game currency to have an exchange value relative to real-world currency. Now, if this sounds like World of Warcraft gold farming or old MMORPG marketplaces, you're pretty close. Some ideas just don't seem to go away. They evolve or transform. In the play-to-earn model, incentives for players are matched to the inherent exchange rate of the in-game currency token to the real-world value. Money in this sense is less about store of value, and it all becomes a question of speculation, which in a sense is no different from NFT art. And that many games have started mixing in NFT as part of this equation, then shouldn't really be a surprise to anyone. It's part of the same arm of economics that are at play here. Here's what I mean. When you look deeper into the NFT marketplace, it looks like a kind of game. They're sprites, and sometimes they are animated and sometimes not, like what you see on the screen. You can collect digital items, and they can appreciate or depreciate in relative value. The value of the NFT is in direct proportion to the community size of the collection. And if anything, I'd argue that what we see in economics from a pricing perspective of these digital assets is a realization of some phenomena where we can price a community, which, well, I'll just note that is one, quote, gnarly, end quote, idea. So these play to earn games, which I again think the name is just terrible because it's really just a digital job. So let's call it that. These digital jobs reward players for their time and energy. Now, if you picked up on what I just said, let me kind of slow down and explain why that's so key and how it factors into the potential of the multiverse. Humanity is entering this phase where digital jobs, which are digital products where we convert a human's time and energy, their productive output, into a digital currency that functions as a store of value, which can impact either the digital product or the real world in a far more efficient way possible. If you skipped ahead, just let me touch lightly on what the connection is here. In applications today, there is a large value loss occurring between the end user and the producer. The value loss, which is like a signal loss, is due to inefficiencies inherent in a human using their credit card to make an in-app purchase, whose funds eventually make their way to the game developer. And that's why Anchor is so attractive to me. When I first saw the Axie Infinity story, I was initially concerned about Anchor's exposure into the play-to-earn space, except as I sat back and really thought about the arguments, the real questions driving under the hood, I then realized this just wasn't a story about Anchor, but that it also involved AMP, and even more, it involved each of us and the future. The future is inherently mysterious, but I do know this. This is Unusual Due Diligence. I am your host Poseidon, god of the sea, and I come to you live by way of me, the Talking Milkshake. In today's unusual episode, I compared Diablo Immortal to Axie Infinity, and in the process took us on a deep journey into profound questions about efficiency, in-app purchases, AMP token, and the Anchor token. Make waves, my friends.